When Constant found himself awake, it was long past midnight, and the great house of Sir Joyous was dark and silent. For a time he lay confused, for the sound of music and song was with him still, but presently he remembered the chamber in which he lay. Then came the memory of his evening with the household of Sir Joyous, of the laughter that had echoed in the halls and gardens, and of the light words that had passed so freely as the company had sat at supper. For there were many guests at the table of the Lord of the Marble Palace, resting a while from the perils of the road, or the labor of a weary task. But as memory came, he knew that his sleep had been troubled by anxious dreams, and now the thoughts of those dreams thronged upon him, so that he was beset by urgent questions. Through all the feasting, he had kept himself sober and vigilant, as became a knight of the Splendid Way. But he had seen others of the same service, strangely heedless, as though no journey lay beyond the gates, no battles to fight, no wrongs to meet and conquer. But the pleasant Sir Joyous, seeing the question in his eyes, had spoken a wise word. "But see, this is a house of ease and rest, and are we not bidden to rejoice always?" And that subtle word had checked his doubts, until he had gone to his chamber to sleep. Now those doubts returned more strongly. It came to his heart that there had been little grace in his leaving the carpenter, and also that he had never felt so far from the hand and the power of the great king. At that he was awake indeed, and sought to call back to mind the wondrous joy, the vision of the face. But he sought in vain, for the vision seemed far away. A face came indeed, but it looked at him more in sorrow than in love, and he knew at last that it was the face of that humble carpenter, as he had seen him at their time of parting. Turning away from the gate in patient silence, and with down-bent head, sorrowful and reproachful was that look, but so great was its power that at last he rose from his bed. "I know not what I fear," he said in his heart, "but I must resolve my fears ere I sleep again." Now he found that he was not utterly in the dark, for at his bedside burned a small silver lamp, which bore the name Reflection. By the light of the lamp he dressed himself, save for his armor, and took the lamp and left the chamber. He remembered that in the great hall below he had seen a book upon a stand, a book that seemed to be a book of the counsel of the journey. "If they keep in reverence the book," he said, "they must be good and faithful servants of the great king, and I shall fear nothing, but I must see before I sleep." So by the light of the lamp he made his way down the great staircase to the hall, and found the place and the book. The book bore the emblem of the great king upon its cover, and the same noble emblem was emblazoned on a rich curtain which hung behind the wall behind. Sir Constant went to the book and opened it by the light of the silver lamp, but to his amazement he found that it was not what it seemed to be. In semblance of a book of the king's counsel, it was mockery within, for the words of the king's wisdom were changed and false. The counsels of toil and duty were not there, nor yet the counsels of love to the loveless, and help to the helpless, and succor for the needy. He saw no sign of the king's joy in the soul that is meek and humble, or in the heart that gives itself for others, or in the pity that cheers the lot of the burdened and afflicted. These the maker of the book had cast aside as though they grieved his spirit, and instead had chosen the tales of pleasant things, of the glories of the strong, and of the might of kings. Of these things he had made a world that Constant knew not at all, a world that had no love, but the love of ease and power. Then Sir Constant, in mingled fear and anger, rent the book across, and cast the fragments upon the floor. Never again should its false counsels deceive any man. Then he took up the lamp, and turned to the crimson curtain which hung upon the wall, bearing the royal emblem. "Perchance," he said, "they have here a picture of the great king, or of his city, but I fear me that it will be as false as the book." And he drew the curtain aside, holding up the lamp so that he might see what lay beyond. Now the picture, hidden by the curtain, was the portrait of Sir Joyous, the lord of the palace, fairly painted and having his name beneath. Gracious and comely, he smiled from the canvas as he smiled upon his guests. And so friendly was the smile that for a moment Sir Constant was rebuked, remembering the courteous welcome of the man whose secrets he now sought to uncover. But even as this thought came, the light of the silver lamp shone clearly on the portrait, and as the beams played upon the painted face, the knight saw a strange and fearful thing. The face changed, the gracious courtesy faded away, greed and pride and gluttony shone from the eyes, and the mouth was foolish with the folly of wine. And at the shoulder of Sir Joyous stood a ghostly shadow that was at first a shadow only, dim and unformed, but as the knight moved the lamp to see better, the shadow took form, and became a man, clad in mail, with a sword and dagger drawn, and with evil eyes that shone fiercely through visor bars. And so strong was the menace in that glowering look and in the naked steel that Sir Constant started and gave a cry, and drew back, so the curtain fell and the enchanted picture was concealed. He needed not to see it again, for he knew that he had been warned of peril. So he ran back to his chamber, and with the silver lamp to aid him, donned his knightly arms. Then he left his room and went out to the corridor, eager to escape, but resolved to know the plot of his secret foe. There was no man in the corridor, but afar off he saw a light from the door that stood ajar. So he took his shield upon his arm, and drew his sword, and strode down the corridor to the lighted doorway. On the rich carpet of that floor he went silently, so that he had reached the threshold of the room before those within were aware of his coming. There were two, and they sat at a table in the room with a chart spread before him. One was Sir Joyous, the lord of the palace, not gracious and smiling now, but with craft and cunning in his eyes. The other was a knight who had sat at the board in the evening, far off from Sir Constant, but seen as a knight of great strength and proud and haughty in bearing, but was not of the royal service, but a guest of Sir Joyous. Some had called him the Black Knight, from the color of his armor, and others the Knight of the Leopard, from the emblem upon his shield. But his true name was not spoken, for he was said to be under a vow to conceal it. Now he wore a helmet, but he had put off his heavy mail, and he spoke sternly to Sir Joyous, pointing to a place upon the chart. See, here in his path lies the Valley of Toil, where I care little to follow him. But if you keep him here even for a few days, it will have little zest for such a place as that. Then when he is wandering from the way, I can come upon him at my leisure, and conquer him with ease. It is well planned, said Sir Joyous. By fair words and promises I will seek to keep him here. That is my part. The rest I leave to thee. It is grievous to me to have those pestilent knights in my halls, but it is something for my pains, that this is the road to doom. Then they laughed together, an evil laugh laden with dark thoughts. But the laugh ended suddenly, for the Black Knight heard a sound at the door and turned, and with a fierce cry drew down his visor. Yet in that moment Constant has seen his eyes, and knew him for the evil knight of the pitcher in the hall. Then blustered the false Sir Joyous, like a friend who had been wronged. How is this, Sir Knight? Why, that sword, and this night waking? Is this a courtesy due to a house of friendship? Sir Constant eyed him scornfully, deigning no answer, for he saw that this palace was a place of treachery and deceit, and he longed of a great longing for the open air of the Splendid Way. And woe is mine that I left that way, he said in his heart, for now there may be great loss ere I win back to it. So as the plotters sprang to their feet, he turned to make his escape.